The US has taken a bold step by imposing sanctions on Russia's oil giants, Rosneft and Lukoil, signaling a significant shift in Donald Trump's approach to the Ukraine conflict. This move, the first of its kind since Trump's return to power, has sparked intense debate and raised questions about its effectiveness and timing. But here's the catch: will these sanctions truly make a difference, or are they just a symbolic gesture? U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent justified the sanctions, citing Putin's refusal to end the war and the need to cut off funding to the Kremlin's war machine. He emphasized the U.S.'s willingness to take further action if necessary. Trump himself has praised the sanctions as tremendous, but experts are divided on their potential impact. Some argue that the success of these sanctions hinges on how aggressively the U.S. enforces them. So, what exactly has been announced? The Treasury's sanctions freeze all U.S.-based assets of Rosneft and Lukoil, while also prohibiting American companies and individuals from conducting business with them. Additionally, dozens of subsidiaries of these companies will face sanctions. The U.S. has also threatened secondary sanctions on foreign financial institutions that engage with Rosneft and Lukoil, potentially targeting banks facilitating Russian oil sales in China, India, and Turkey. Rosneft and Lukoil are Russia's largest oil companies, responsible for nearly half of the country's crude oil exports, according to Bloomberg. Both companies have already been sanctioned by the UK, and the EU is set to follow suit with a new round of sanctions this week. But why now? During his 2024 campaign, Trump promised to end the Ukraine war within 24 hours if elected. However, since returning to the White House, he has faced a more complex reality. His stance on the war has wavered, from claiming last month that Ukraine could reclaim all lost territories since the 2022 invasion, to suggesting this week that the Donbas region should be divided, leaving most of it under Russian control. This week, Trump abruptly cancelled a planned second summit with Putin, reportedly due to frustration with preconditions set by the Russian side. His impatience was evident when he stated, "Every time I speak with Vladimir, I have good conversations, and then they don't go anywhere." Trump has resisted pressure from allies in Congress to impose further sanctions, but Russia's unwavering position and sustained lobbying from Europe seem to have influenced his decision. Will these sanctions be effective? Energy industry taxes account for around a quarter of Russia's budget, and additional sanctions will further restrict Rosneft and Lukoil's business operations, putting more pressure on Putin. Marshall Billingsley, a Treasury official from Trump's first term, highlighted the importance of targeting banks that do business with these companies, as it would complicate matters for importers of Russian crude oil. Thomas Graham, a fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, expressed skepticism, stating, "If the White House thinks this will lead to a radical change in the Kremlin's conduct or Putin's policy, they're deluding themselves." The Kremlin has been very good at circumventing these kinds of sanctions. Some experts speculate that the flow of Russian oil to India, a major buyer in recent years, could drastically decrease due to US sanctions. Trump has been urging India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to end these imports, and the new measures could accelerate this by providing Indian refineries with a way out of long-term contracts. Energy analyst Thomas O'Donnell said, "This is very significant. They can ruin Russia as a petrostate." Ultimately, the success of these sanctions depends on how actively the US enforces its threats against financial institutions dealing with Rosneft and Lukoil. The Biden administration chose not to sanction these companies earlier due to concerns about rising energy costs and inflation. Experts argue that Trump's campaign promise to keep petrol prices low and manage the cost of living crisis may dilute the impact of these sanctions, if they significantly affect oil prices. What other options does the US have? Ukraine's allies continue to push Trump towards alternative support measures, such as using frozen Russian assets from the start of the war to fund Ukraine's defense. This week, EU leaders are expected to agree on a €140 billion interest-free loan for Ukraine backed by Russian assets frozen in Europe. However, reports suggest the US has distanced itself from this plan. Volodymyr Zelensky is also advocating for long-range weapons that can strike deep into Russia. His efforts to secure Tomahawk missiles at a White House meeting last week were thwarted after Trump's phone call with Putin. The Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump administration might allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles supplied by allies for attacks inside Russia, including British-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles used in a recent strike on a chemical plant in Bryansk. However, Trump denied lifting any restrictions on social media, stating, "The US has nothing to do with those missiles, wherever they may come from, or what Ukraine does with them." And this is where it gets controversial. Do you think these sanctions will have the desired impact? Or is it a case of too little, too late? Share your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss the potential outcomes and implications of this move.